Hi, this is Professor Bauer. Welcome to week 2 of ICT 4105. This is a quick roadmap to walk you through all the things that are going on this week, just to remind you of some important things, and hopefully this will be a quick thing we do every beginning of the week. We'll look at what happened last week, an overview of the activities and assignments for this week. Some information about a volunteer Zoom room session starting this coming Wednesday night. A little bit about voice of the customer, which you'll be reading some, and then what the voice of the customer major assessment is all about, the major assignment for that. And then we'll close with a note on excellence, something I've entitled, "Is this the best you can do?" Last week, first week, it's always a bit of a craziness getting everything set up, finding your way, getting contacts, but I saw really good discussions, good back and forth, not just the perfunctory, hey, nice comment, posted 5 minutes before the deadline. I was very impressed with the analysis of the companies that some of you chosen. Some of them were your own companies, but also some were ones you were looking around, hopefully, or possibly considering investing in. All those were good. So keep up the engagement, the intensity, the good hard work. And as I look at the major assignment, which I'll be grading the next few days, I'll probably have some more to say in the roadmap for next week, just in terms of making sure that if there are things that are missing in the major assignments, I'll check those. So this week we'll look at procurement leadership in a marketplace, trends, processes, communications, and ethics. Lots of stuff. Keep in mind our sub-theme for this class is the question, how is the COVID-19 pandemic going to affect procurement? How is it going to affect our supply chains? These are things that we really don't know the answers just yet, but they will definitely change in some ways. We've already seen national governments like the United States realign, providing incentives, $100 million that was provided just a few days ago to encourage companies that make personal protection equipment, masks, etc., to manufacture those here in the United States. Also, a proposal in Congress working through about the manufacture of generic pharmaceuticals. They are, for the most part, manufactured in China. Is this the right supply chain to adopt in the midst of possible drug availability issues? So more to come on this area. So we're going to look at some different leadership methods, agile and business and technology leadership. We'll look at cybersecurity in the supply chain, how we manage third-party relationships. Finally, we'll look at a program called Voice of the Customer, which many companies have identified as a key way of understanding what their customers need. We'll look at pros and cons and be able to prepare ourselves to write a report as one of the assignments. In the week's activities, note that we're jumping into the Nicoletti book. It's a great book. It's not a big 6,000 page thing, and the chapters are pretty small. They're very concise. I would weigh Nicoletti very carefully. He does not throw around a lot of words, and I think you'll find his writing style very compact and very full of meaning. So keep that in mind. There is an article to read on voice of the customer. I tried for about 25 minutes to find this bad boy here, 29 pages PDF, and it just took so long that I'm gonna just make a PDF and send it to all of you. Please don't sell it on eBay or anything like that, but one of the students also had a similar experience, and I just don't want you to get gummed up with trying to find this stuff. So this will be from McGraw-Hill Education, used with our permission. DU pays access for this. We're not bypassing any copy restrictions or anything like that. So, but this voice of the customer case study, about 30 pages. Make sure you read it. It's very helpful, and just keep that in mind. And make sure you're contributing to the 2 discussions, and then the final assignment will be a voice of the customer report that you choose. So assignments, you have an overview, you have a lecture on procurement trends. Make sure you're thinking in the back of your mind, okay, this presentation was done pre-COVID. What is going to change about that? And it's going to. And then the various readings and instructional materials, etc. I wanted to come back to something I mentioned in the beginning video. Each week, I'd like to offer a Zoom room on Wednesday evening, 6 to 7 p.m. 6 to 7 p.m. Mountain Time, so those of you on the East Coast don't have to stay up too late. And if that's a bad time, we'll figure out another time. But I've used that same slot in other courses at DU ICT, and I think it's worked well for everyone. But anyway, the topics that we deal with are clarifying any questions on the assignment. If you're stuck on something, you have some questions, anything that's not clear. It's kind of like my version of office hours, but anyone can come. The meeting is not mandatory. Okay, this is not a class requirement. This is an internet-based class, and so we don't require anyone to show up at a particular time. But if you have questions and you don't mind talking about them, in a group, we often have anywhere from 5 to 10 people. It just really, as the course and the term move on toward the end of the term, more folks seem to attend. The coordinates are listed here. They're also listed. I'll have them listed in an invite for you as well. Voice of the customer. A lot of you have companies that survey your customers. I just finished a survey of 150,000 engineers about a proposed engineering certification that we're working on in my corporate job. And we say the voice of the customer is absolutely vital. Why? I think some of you are maybe even familiar with a quote from Steve Jobs, and I used to use this quote all the time. Jobs said, it's really hard to design products by focus groups. A lot of times people don't know what they want until you show it to them. In other words, I want something that'll play music, I want to answer my phone, I want to manage my life, I want to be able to do email, and I have 2 or 3 different devices for this, and voila, Apple comes out with the iPhone and really changes mobile telephony, mobile computing, and really introduces a brand new product. So we'll keep in mind a guy named Drew Hansen, who was a biographer of Steve Jobs, said when Jobs later came back after being fired at Apple, when he later came back, he said that Jobs' views had evolved. He'd been listening to customers for more than 20 years, and by that time was deeply attuned to their needs. He says, and there's a link to the video here, you've got to start with the customer experience. That's something that we all talk about, UX, the user experience, customer experience, and work backwards to the technology. I've made this mistake probably more than anyone else in this room. As we have tried to come up with a strategy and a vision for Apple, it started with, what incredible benefits can we give the customer? Where can we take the customer? I think that's the right path to take. So Jobs learned as his maturity and his insight and as Apple's success grew, not to risk being out of touch with what the customer said he or she needed. So keep that in mind. The major assignment for this week is the voice of the customer. There's the need to take the reading assignments and all the materials and describe a situation where a voice of the customer process would be used. And you may want to use this in your portfolio assignment later on. You have to do several things. Number one, construct a framework to bring the voice of the customer procurement into, or the voice of the customer into the procurement process. In other words, the outputs of the VOC effort are going to guide our quality, guide our materials, guide our production of the product or the service, whatever it is, in these following ways. And then summarize that in an executive summary, 1 to 2 page document. So some of you will look at the last point and say, oh, it's a 1 to 2 page document. It's not. There's work before, there's a framework, there's a plan. I don't want to see all those details, but I want you to refer to them. I've decided to use this particular framework based on the feedback that we had in da-da-da-da-da, and these are the ways that we're going to, in executive summary language, no more than a couple pages, and do it that way. So keep that in mind, okay? Some of this work is cumulative. You've got to do 2 or 3 things, but all we ask for is the final document. So keep that in mind. And then lastly, the rubric is your friend. All right, here is how that major assignment is going to be graded. So look it over. You'll see what a perfect score is all about and what something decidedly less than perfect is all about. So should be no surprise in getting this done. Finally, and I said finally twice, but finally I want to close out with a little story, and I've entitled it based on a true deeds and actions in history, and I call it, Is This the Best You Can Do? It's a challenge for our quality and a challenge for our work. During the late 60s and early 70s, Winston Lord had been tasked, a U.S. State Department official, had been tasked with 3 of the biggest foreign policy projects: the opening to China, bringing the Vietnam War to a close, and an attempt to improve relations with the Russians. He was a speechwriter for Secretary of State Henry Kissinger under President Richard Nixon. And it fell to him to write these speeches for the ambassador to China, for various presidential and secretarial states, messages and speeches. Not the easiest job, considering that Kissinger wrote a lot of his own speeches, and he was a tough critic. The story goes that Winston Lord prepared and submits the first draft of a speech to Kissinger one evening. Kissinger then calls Lord the next morning for feedback on the speech. He said, "Is this the best you can do?" Lord begins to question his work, and then he says, "Well, I really thought so, but I'll try one more time." Believe it or not, this uncomfortable and rejecting process apparently goes on 8 more times. In other words, Kissinger says, "Is this the best you can do?" And Winston Lord said, "Well, I thought so, but I'll try it one more time." Finally, Winston Lord returns to Kissinger's office with the 9th draft of the speech and awaits the response. And Kissinger calls him the next day and says, "Is this the best you can do?" And Winston Lord is fed up. He spent a lot of time on this. And finally says, "Henry, I've beaten my brains out on this thing. This is the 9th draft. I know it's the best I can do. I can't possibly improve one more word." Kissinger then looks at Winston Lord and nonchalantly says, "Well, in that case, I'll read it. In that case, I'll read it." I don't know what Lord's response was at that point, I'm sure it's unprintable, but it illustrates something that we should do that kind of quality check ourselves before we hand something in. Not just for a class, but certainly the stakes get bigger as our career gets more mature and the decisions we're advocating for or against become more significant. Is this the best you can do? Well, do your best this week. Have a great week. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye now.